I've talked on the program about structural racism, institutional racism over the years. And we have here in front of us a story in Think Progress about a white suburb that is fighting to keep black bus riders out by limiting where buses stop. That is a really good example of how, in spite of affirmative action, in spite of a black president, as some people like to point to, we still have a very specific type of racism in this country. There is an Ohio suburb that is doing everything it can. This is from Think Progress, including risking millions in federal highway funding to keep mostly minority bus riders from a nearby city from coming into their community. The showdown started in 2010 when the Greater Dayton Regional Transit Authority proposed adding 3 new bus stops in Beavercreek. Beavercreek is a largely white suburb about 15 minutes east of Dayton. These stops would give Dayton bus riders to Beavercreek access to Beavercreek's major shopping mall, nearby businesses, a medical clinic, and Wright State University. So the suburb of Beavercreek started facing the prospect of these additional stops of people coming in from Dayton, and they started putting in as many hurdles as possible. They created hurdles that were unheard of. Like, for example, the bus shelters have to have heat and air conditioning and high-tech surveillance cameras. Very expensive features that aren't part of this bus line and certainly have never been required. The demands couldn't be met. This stalled the process. So a lot of people in the area are saying this boils down to race. Plain and simple, this is about race. According to the 2010 census, 9 in 10 Beavercreek residents are white. 73% of those who ride the Dayton buses are minorities. I can't see anything else but it being a racial thing, says Sam Gresham, the state chair of Common Cause Ohio. In talking about racism, I don't want to get into the minutia of what will happen in this particular case. I think we understand what's going on here. In talking about racism, a lot of people say we don't really have racism in the U.S. anymore. Slavery is now illegal. We have a black president. We have affirmative action. We can't discriminate against people on a basis of race. That's fine. But this is an example of racism that is structural racism. You can get a job wherever you want. You can't be discriminated against because you are a minority. But transportation between the historically minority and poor neighborhoods where there are no jobs and the historically white neighborhoods where there are jobs is pretty bad. It's very difficult if you don't have a car to get from one area to the other. This is a form of structural racism. It's not individuals saying, I don't like black people, so I'm going to do this, that, or the other thing, although in this particular case, it may be somewhat the catalyst for why there's resistance to these additional bus stops. But we see these examples in many places. We can look at standardized testing. Standardized testing could be considered a form of structural racism because the tests themselves are geared towards people from certain socioeconomic backgrounds are going to do better. And I think what you'll uncover as you look at most examples of structural racism is that they affect specific races more than others, kind of as a side effect of really they affect poor people. And that's often what it is. Structural racism often is tied in with kind of bias or structural prejudice against people who don't have a lot of money. This is a good example of it. We'll follow what happened specifically in Ohio, but for people looking for examples of that type of racism, this is one.